Despite negotiations and its statements in favor of peace, Russia is doing exactly what it has been doing for years in Ukraine, launching missiles and drones en masse to cause as much damage as possible. On Sunday, September 9th, Russia went too far. It struck Kyiv with its largest attack to date. Ukraine did not take lightly what Russia did. This is a retaliation. Ukraine strikes back at Russia after the bombing of Kyiv, inflicting even more damage on Putin's war machine. September 7th was one of the most terrifying days of Russia's invasion for Ukraine. Russia chose that day to launch what The Guardian described as the largest air attack ever carried out against Ukraine. The darkest point was that Russian drones managed to breach Ukrainian air defenses to strike multiple targets in Kyiv. The horrific bombardment of the Ukrainian capital saw Russia once again use its air power to target civilians rather than soldiers during wartime. This has already cost the lives of 1,883 civilians as of July 31st. September 7th, unfortunately added to the rising death toll. Russian missiles and drones killed at least 3 people on Sunday, including a mother and a baby. The Guardian reports that at least 18 people were injured and several buildings were set ablaze. In addition to Kyiv, Russia also struck Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, Odessa, Kharkiv, and Kryvyi Rih, with the attack beginning at 6:00 a.m. in local time. This was a clear sign that Russia aimed to target civilians just as they were waking up to start their morning. However, Russia can claim at least one legitimate target. As reported by the Kyiv Post, on September 9th, Russia's air attack successfully struck a government building in the heart of Kyiv, causing a fire at the Ukrainian government's headquarters for the first time since the war began. The outlet reports that this was the first time Russia targeted Ukraine's political leadership by striking a major government complex in Kyiv. No casualties were reported among Ukrainian political parties. However, some politicians may be among the 18 injured. Volodymyr Zelensky immediately condemned the recent Russian strike. The Guardian reports that he described Russia's actions as deliberate crimes in an escalation of the conflict. He added that genuine diplomacy in Vladimir Putin's war should have started much earlier. Russia continues to show that it does not want legitimate peace. September 9th clearly proved this to the world. Russia often acts differently from what Vladimir Putin claims to want for peace. Ukraine could have spent the weekend licking its collective wounds and preparing a response, but it did not. Ukraine already had a response ready before the fires in Kyiv were even extinguished. Ukraine retaliated against Russia with a series of calculated and highly coordinated airstrikes, highlighting the difference in approach between the two nations. Russia, as usual, targeted civilians and cities. Ukraine's swift and brutal retaliation struck Russia's military-industrial complex. It once again hit targets it knows will financially bleed Putin's dry oil infrastructure. 2 of these, in fact, bring us to the first of Ukraine's devastating retaliatory strikes. Just hours after the announcement of Russia's horrific strike on Kyiv, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces used Telegram to announce its multifaceted retaliation. Another major Russian oil refinery was at the top of Ukraine's target list. Units of Ukraine's Special Operations Forces also attacked the Ilsky refinery in Russia's Krasnodar region. The General Staff announced this on Telegram, stating that the strike caused multiple explosions and a fire in the area of the Ilsky facility, though the full consequences of the attack remain to be clarified at the time of this video. We know at least that Ukrainian reports about the fires are accurate. Before the General Staff's announcement, the Telegram channel Astra was already sharing images and videos of Ukraine's airstrike. One photo shows smoke rising into the sky, likely from the Ilsky refinery. Videos, including one filmed by a driver, show the facility in greater detail with the same smoke rising from it. Another video lasting only a few seconds shows nothing more than what appears to be a Ukrainian drone flying in the sky. It is assumed that this drone caused the damage to Ilsky. Astra's report cited Russia's response to the Ukrainian strike. Let's see if you recognize Russia's usual excuse. Yet another fire at one of these facilities has resurfaced. Debris from drones fell on the Ilsky refinery in the Seversky district. As a result, one of the processing workshops caught fire, according to the report. The fire, which spread over several square meters, was quickly contained. There were no casualties. Firefighters, emergency services, and rescue teams are responding at the scene. The refinery's personnel were evacuated to shelters. So no casualties on the Russian side, as is often the case with Ukrainian strikes, since Ukraine targets infrastructure and facilities rather than people. You likely noticed the word debris in that statement. Once again, Russia wants to make it seem like its air defenses shot down Ukrainian drones. By chance, the debris from these drones happens to fall exactly on the target Ukraine intended to hit. The debris excuse is almost comical. But for Russia, the potential damage caused by Ukraine is no laughing matter. The Ilsky oil refinery is presented on its official website as a modern industrial complex in one of the main refineries in Russia's southern district. It is ideally positioned to utilize the Black Sea and Azov seaports. This means it can be assumed that the oil from this refinery often ends up in Crimea and possibly even in Ukraine's eastern and southern regions. The refinery boasts the humorous slogan, "Progress in harmony with nature." There will be no progress at Ilsky for now. Ukraine's devastating retaliatory strike just set fire to part of a refinery responsible for processing up to 642 million tons of oil per year. Ukraine did not destroy the entire facility, but sparked a fire potentially damaging critical parts of the infrastructure. This facility is responsible for producing refined petroleum products such as gasoline and diesel, which Russian soldiers need to launch assaults against Ukraine using mechanized units. The Kyiv report says Russia claims to have extinguished the fire caused by Ukraine. Part of the refinery will likely remain out of service until Russia completes repairs. It is unclear exactly when those repairs might take place. Ukraine has been regularly attacking Russian refineries for the past month, as we will see later in the video. Striking only the Ilsky refinery might have been enough as a response to Russia's largest air attack. A precision strike on another refinery increases pressure on an already strained Russian oil industry due to Ukraine's deep strike strategy. But Ukraine was far from done. Almost simultaneously with the Ilsky strike, Ukraine had another target in its sights. The Ukrainian General Staff stated on Telegram that missile and artillery forces coordinated their actions with unmanned systems and other groups to strike the Linear Production Dispatch Station, or LVDS-8N, located in Bryansk. LVDS-8N belongs to the main steel horse oil pipeline with a capacity of 105 million tons, according to the General Staff. The facility is strategically important for ensuring the transport of petroleum products for Russia's occupying army. Several impacts caused a fire near the pumping station and reservoir park. The Kyiv Post clarifies in its report on the Ukrainian strike that this is not just any old LVDS hit by Ukraine. It is part of the famous Druzhba oil pipeline, which was responsible for transporting refined eco-petroleum products from Belarus to Russia. Ukraine strikes intelligently. Its attacks on Ilsky and other sites reduce Russia's ability to produce its own refined petroleum products. Russia continues to purchase these products from an increasingly limited list of allies willing to supply it, with Belarus at the top of that list. Striking the Druzhba pipeline removes Belarusian oil from the equation of the war in Ukraine. Ukraine knows the importance of this pipeline to Russia, which is why it has attacked it multiple times before. The most recent of these strikes, before September 9th, occurred on August 13th. Once again, Ukraine used long-range kamikaze drones to strike a key part of the pipeline. Ukraine attacked the Onecha oil pumping station in Bryansk, causing a fire. As with the refinery strikes, Ukraine does not destroy the entire pipeline. Druzhba is far too large for that. It targets strategic points of the pipeline with precise strikes, forcing Russia to invest time and money in repairs, while the pipeline must be temporarily shut down. While the pipeline's ties to Belarus are obviously significant, Ukraine may have had another reason to strike Druzhba beyond Russia's supply from Belarus. The pipeline also enables Belarus and Russia to supply several Eastern European countries with oil, namely Slovakia and Hungary. This supply has continued throughout the war in Ukraine, which many consider an interesting form of hypocrisy on the part of some European countries. Hungary and Slovakia maintain ties with Russia, with the former having significant diplomatic relations and trade with it, while the latter has suspended official military aid to Ukraine and criticized the European Union for the severity of its sanctions. Ironically, the EU spared the Druzhba pipeline during its initial bans on Russian oil at the start of Putin's invasion. In May 2022, Euronews reported that Hungary played a major role in ensuring the pipeline remained open. It prevailed after 4 weeks of tense negotiations. The EU ultimately focused its efforts almost exclusively on Russian oil exports by sea, allowing the Druzhba pipeline to continue supplying landlocked European countries. For Ukraine, this exemption has lasted too long. It is only in the last 6 months that the EU has developed a plan for a complete exit from Russian oil, and this will not be completed until 2028. Ukraine knows that Druzhba has been a problem for a long time, and it is tired of waiting for Europe to do something about it. So it targets the pipeline with its drones, which angers some countries. On August 22nd, the Moscow Times reported that Hungary and Slovakia demanded that Ukraine stop its strikes on the Druzhba pipeline. The foreign ministries of both countries issued a joint statement to formalize their reprimand. In 9 days, the Druzhba pipeline, which supplies Hungary and then Slovakia, experienced its third incident, according to the statement. They called on the European Commission to immediately ensure compliance with commitments to guarantee the energy security of EU member states. Ukraine ignores such statements and has added a fourth incident to the list. It will say that the energy security of some countries close to Putin matters little to it when this pipeline enables Russia to generate the money needed to continue the war. Ukraine is taking sanctions into its own hands with its long-range drone strikes. Ukraine's retaliation consisted of neutralizing 2 major oil-related targets in a single night. The message is clear: if Russia strikes Kyiv, Ukraine will target Russian oil. But Ukraine did not stop there with its September 7 strikes, preventing Russia from celebrating the supposed success of killing more Ukrainian civilians and hitting the government building. Ukraine also struck Kursk. You may recall Kursk. In August 2024, Ukraine conducted a counter-invasion in this Russian border oblast, becoming the first country to take Russian territory since 1945. Russia pushed Ukraine out of Kursk, but the region remains a constant target for Ukraine. On September 7th, Ukraine struck again. The General Staff's telegram message confirmed successful strikes on the positions of the occupiers' personnel and logistical warehouses of Russian military units in the Kursk region of the Russian Federation. As with the refinery strike, the extent of the damage from the drone attacks remains to be confirmed. The scale of the damage may matter less than the targets neutralized by Ukraine. The supply depots in Kursk are likely used to provide Russian troops in the Sumy Oblast with what they need to conduct assaults there. Destroy the supply depots and personnel facilities in Ukraine weakens Russia's assaults on its own territory. Ukraine's revenge was complete and Russian oil facilities suffered. We mentioned earlier in the video that we would return to Ukraine's constant strikes on Russia's oil refining capacity. While Russian refineries have been a target for Ukraine since the start of deep strikes in 2024, Ukraine significantly intensified these in August. Ilsky was neither the first nor the last refinery hit by Ukraine. There has been a wave of such strikes with devastating consequences for Russia's refined oil industry. On August 26th, United 44 Media published a report on Ukraine's refinery strikes in August up to that date, noting that they had affected at least 17% of Russia's refining capacity. As with Ilsky, Ukraine does not destroy entire refineries. Its long-range drones, as impressive as they are, simply lack the firepower for that. Ukraine repeatedly strikes key parts of refineries, forcing Russia to repair them before they can resume operations. These repairs are causing significant problems for Russia. According to Ukraine's New Voice, in July, Russia was already struggling to repair its oil refineries due to Western sanctions complicating the purchase of necessary parts. Scheduled maintenance, which Russian refinery owners must perform annually, is now combined with unforeseen repairs caused by Ukrainian strikes, creating a massive backlog. Ukraine does not need to completely destroy refineries. It just needs to force Russia to shut them down. Enough damage to necessitate repairs that Russia increasingly struggles to carry out. By late August, TradingView reported that Russia's offline oil refining capacity reached 64 million tons, a 65% increase over forecasts. Ukrainian drone strikes are forcing Russia to make unscheduled repairs, disrupting maintenance schedules. The impact is felt within Russia as much as among Russian troops who do not receive the fuel they need. Deprived of their usual mechanized equipment, these troops must attack, while Russian civilians face significant supply and demand issues. According to Politico, on September 2nd, massive gasoline queues are affecting many Russian oblasts. Refineries cannot supply fuel to gas stations for consumers. Russian prices have also skyrocketed. They may exceed the figures reported by Russia. This is according to Ilya Nisadovsky, the chief analyst at Ukraine's Network for the Protection of National Interests. There's not enough gasoline in Karelia. There's not enough gasoline in the Khabarovsk territory. There's not enough gasoline in the Far East. There's a shortage of gasoline in Primorsky Krai, Nesedovsky told Politico. If you look at the price tags, the price is about 25% higher than what official statistics show. These are real losses for Russians and transporters. Ukraine's retaliation after the Kyiv strike exacerbates these issues. It is likely not the last refinery Ukraine will target. It has established an effective strategy, and the impact is clear to everyone in Russia. This is cause and effect, and it is brutally clear. Ukraine strikes refineries, and the Russian people, including the thousands of soldiers dying every month at the front, bear the consequences. Russia could face worse. Frustrated that Putin's decision to bomb Kyiv with the largest airstrike of the war once again illustrates the gap between Russian leaders' words and actions. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is ready to act, according to Reuters, which reported Trump's remarks after Russia's attack on Kyiv. When a journalist asked if this attack meant he was now ready to move to the second phase of sanctions against Russia, Trump offered a simple response: "Yes, I am." No further details were provided, however. It seems likely that this second phase of sanctions will see the U.S. punish countries that primarily buy Russian oil with new tariffs. This is what it did with India with Trump, stating a few days before Russia's strike on Kyiv that the effect of those tariffs was already being felt. Trump said it had cost Russia hundreds of billions. "You call that doing nothing? I haven't even launched phase 2 or 3 yet," he said. It seems phase 2 is approaching. What this means for Russia, especially with Ukraine already demonstrating its ability to directly strike Russian oil refineries, remains to be seen. What is not in question is that Ukraine has a new weapon it can use to cause far more damage to Russian refineries than ever before. The Flamingo is preparing to take off and could become the most formidable missile in Ukraine's arsenal. Learn how Ukraine's new Flamingo missile will send Russia back to the Stone Age in our video. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to The Military Show for updates on the war in Ukraine.